Welcome to Objections with Stan Willis. I'm Michael Morris. With me, almost as always, C. Stanley Willis. How are you, buddy?
I'm great. I don't know when I've felt this good. I mean, in recent history.
If you're just going to start out lying, we can start the show over. Okay, I don't have to put up with this. I've got a question for you because you and I always say when we're done with the show.
I got to tell you though that seriously, I had pleurisy a couple of weeks ago, and they gave me prednisone. I could do that all the time. I felt really good. Hardly needed to sleep.
Is pleurisy having more than one of an object, or is that a Roman dictator? I can't remember.
It's when your lungs really hurt.
Why did your lungs hurt?
Because I'd been coughing a lot.
Huffing gasoline?
It could have been that too.
It always hurts my nose.
Tell them about that in the
I wouldn't either. Whenever I go in there, I'm like, I just need prednisone. Wait, what's prednisone do?
It's a steroid.
You look huge today, by the way. Yeah. You look like
it's
really
not that
ripped.
Kind of a steroid, but you know what was interesting was I felt really good all week. I was really sharp. I didn't sleep much. I didn't need to sleep. I felt awake. It was awesome.
Were you able to like bench 300 pounds?
No, I didn't try.
But you could have.
Probably.
I feel like are we pro Pfizer on this show right now?
I think we're pro prednisone.
Whenever I pick up my kid at school and kids ask me about drugs, I say go get them because if you can, I am pro Pfizer or off-label drugs.
I think there's probably long-term use. There's probably some really bad side effects, but it might be worth it.
I would doubt it. Nobody's ever taken steroids and died.
As long as they tell you what the side effects are, so you can go, it's worth it. You know?
I do like this commercial where it's like, if you can't sleep, if you take this, but you'll have leaky bowels, and it's like, but you'll sleep like an angel. Yeah. Like I always wonder what's too much. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There are 75 ways you might die from this.
Yeah. When the lettering is like,
but they're
this
smiling
big,
when they say it.
What? I always like the one with the two people in the bathtub on the hillside, and I'm just like, that water's cold.
Yeah.
To speak of a lighter subject, because we were talking about media a week ago.
Yes.
I thought, because we always have this conversation when we're done, like, were we taking sides? And I think that we're not taking sides. I think we're stating an opinion, but we're not right, left. I think we're down the middle on all subjects, that we want to know more information and come to a conclusion that way versus I already have a preset condition on what I think from this perspective. Would that be fair?
Yeah.
But then every show we go, shit, man, I hope we didn't.
No, I'm always second guessing myself because I don't want to make the same mistake that I think that the media is making in the fact that they are not at all objective. Almost none of the popular media are objective. Almost none.
Are you saying traditional media, or are you including
traditional media?
Okay,
traditional media, because I think that guys like Glenn Greenwald and Amy Wolf. I actually think if you Tucker Carlson, I never watch Fox News because I don't think anybody's objective on Fox News. But if you watch Tucker Carlson's show in the evening, he has people who disagree with him on the show, and it's an hour long, and he just lets them talk. And he doesn't argue or shout them down, or they will occasionally say, "Well, we disagree on this." I had Andrew Yang on there, which gave me a lot of respect for Andrew Yang. Actually, I kind of like that
Yang
guy.
Gang?
Yeah, I actually kind of like that guy. But other than those few, I'm sure there are some other ones that I'm leaving out. But
he has Glenn Greenwald on. He has Jimmy Dore on. He has.
And one of the things that gave me, because I used to think that Tucker was really just presenting, doing the Fox thing, but he had Glenn Greenwald on. And during the show on national freaking television, he says to Glenn Greenwald, when the Patriot Act came out, I hated you, and I didn't understand what you were saying, and you were right, and I was wrong, and I'm sorry for that. And my respect level for him just exploded, because here's a guy who's actually acting like a journalist, right?
Right.
Here's a guy who's saying, back then I didn't feel threatened by this thing. I didn't see the threat in this thing. I totally missed it. You didn't. I trashed you for that. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I mean, that takes.
But I think that's why that show. And again, I don't watch it. I'm more of an extremist. I want, as I told my daughter when
you're watching InfoWars.
Okay, let me back up. I'm not that extreme, but I don't want to watch the winning team. Right. I don't want to watch the parade. I want to watch the people crying and figuring it out. So, for instance, when Hillary Clinton ran and got trounced, I watched MSNBC because I want to hear the fallout, not to celebrate it. I want you, because what always happens is they say, well, she didn't go here and she didn't do this and her message was, and again, I know from campaign strategy, why she lost. What was her campaign? What was her campaign slogan?
Her campaign was well, it was "I'm with her," right?
But it didn't start that way.
It was supposed to be, but basically, her campaign was "I've earned this, so now it's my turn." That was
correct.
Kind of her.
But her slogan was "Better Together," and it wasn't testing well.
Right.
So they changed it and went with "I'm with her." Trump's was
even Barack Obama said, she didn't lose this because of anything except for the fact that she ran a really lousy campaign.
Correct, but Trump's was "Make America Great Again." MAGA, is that what it stands for? So when you look at this is about us versus this is about her, now you put the focus on, is she likable? I mean, she's not a likable person, right? And a lot of people don't wake up when they go home at night when the Clintons get involved.
She's highly divisive too.
Correct. So did you want somebody that you could look at and say, well, he's thinking of the whole country? It's semantics, but when you look at the wording, that was the issue is if you had to pick him, if it was about him or her, maybe it's different. When your focus is on America and yours is on me.
Yeah, I hated that choice, by the way. The choice between Hillary and Trump. I despised and loathed that trope.
But the Democratic Party, that was their strategy.
I actually voted Libertarian in that race.
Well, part of the strategy was...
I can't even remember that guy's name.
Was it the guy who gave the really wacky... Gary...
Mexico. Yeah, Gary something.
Yeah.
Guy from New Mexico.
Yeah, either way, he was a whack job. But the point being is that they ran what was called the Pied Piper strategy. Get rid of everybody else with experience, so she was running against him. Right. You literally set the table you wanted. And then America was like, oh, it's you or him. I'm going to take him. That was the beginning of, if you voted as a Republican, you're a misogynist, you're racist, you're white supremacist. That all started there, right? Because before that, when it was...
That became... And the other thing that's interesting about Trump is Trump's not... When you look at his platform and the things he's not a Republican in the... And again, this is what we're going to talk about today, is the fact that the freaking words don't mean anything anymore. But Trump is not a Republican in the historical sense. He was a very populist kind of a candidate in that because of his marketing skills, he was able to say, okay, I know what the majority of people think is important, and so I'm going to pick 3 or 4 things that the majority of people think is important, and that's what I'm going to talk about.
Right.
So from a campaign strategy standpoint, that was genius. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know Donald Trump. I just know what I've seen of Donald Trump in the media and stuff. I'm not sure that those things are necessarily what he actually believes. But to his credit, when he got into office, he did try to accomplish the things that he said he was going to accomplish, or he wanted to accomplish. So, I wouldn't vote for him today. I didn't vote for him then. I don't think he's...
I just now voted for Joe Biden again today.
Did you vote for him?
You can vote as many times. It's like American Idol.
Okay. It's like the All-Star game, right?
Yeah. You can vote as many times as you want. You don't even have to go to the stadium.
Vote early, vote often.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's actually a great book on the campaign called the Hemingway. Is it Molly Hemingway? Is that her name? Anyway, I'll pull it out. I can't pull it out. What's the name of the book? It's terrible. I hate when I'm getting
all the places you'll go.
No, but it's about the campaign, and and how it was.
Well, there is a.
It's called Rigged. The name of the book is Rigged.
I thought we were going to say the other one was. Oh shit! I just forgot.
She has done exhaustive research on the campaign, and the conclusions that she came up with, I think, are very insightful, and they're not what you think. It's not what you think, and you should read the book.
Well, I'm not going to, because the book I was going to recommend.
Then you should get the book on tape and listen to it on your mini drives.
I feel like you're pressuring me because you're coming from your left centrist views that you're pressuring me to read. I was going to say the other book.
I'm going to tell you, if you don't read the book, I can't talk to you anymore.
Wait, even on the show? So the show would just be me looking at you? I think we should mime the rest of the show. What I was going to say is I will read that if you'll read this book. It's called Shattered.
Shattered?
I think it's by Matt
Is it
Taibbi.
by William Shatner?
It is. It's just quotes of him when he was yelling at Nichelle Nichols. No, the book was, it's following her campaign. But it was written, all the interviews were just on that side. Really? So it literally starts with the information where, forget what the lady's name is now. She works for Fox. She worked for PBS. She was doing one of the debate formats. Right. And they gave Hillary Clinton the questions and all that stuff. So it's to go through that whole thing. But not to get too far off the point, but again.
It's pretty bad when you get all the debate questions in advance and you still do poorly in the debate.
Well, I believe that was the one that might have been the debate where she said, well, you're not president or whatever. And he said, because you'd be in jail. I think of all the debates, that's all anyone got out of that was that one thing. But what I was going to say is if we went back to that 2015, 2016, that's when these words don't mean anything anymore.
Well, they started, I think, during the Obama administration. So here's what I think. So I think back in, so let's just go back to 2008. In 2008, I could have said that I am a political liberal, that I am a social center right person, and that I am a fiscal center right person. And everybody who understands things would have known exactly what I was saying. So they would have said, okay, so he's a political liberal. That means he's in favor of the first 10 amendments. He's a big freedom guy. He doesn't want huge government. He doesn't want the government involved in too many things. He wants to restrict that. I mean, they would have understood because, that's kind of the Thomas Jefferson, that's Thomas Jefferson liberal world, right? I mean, Thomas Jefferson famously said that the people have two enemies, criminals and the government. I mean,
he was right.
So people would have understood that, and they would have said, they would have understood what I meant. I mean, now, and this just happened to me.
You became a criminal? I feel like
I became a criminal.
We're having a Maury moment right now.
No. Remember when Willie Nelson went on Larry King Live and told everybody he was stoned?
Yeah.
Okay, well, never mind. So back to what we were talking about.
Right.
I think that I was having a conversation a couple weeks ago with a guy. I really just met him, but we were playing golf together and we were sitting at lunch and we were talking about these things. And I kept trying to have a discussion about political positions and things like that. And every time I would say the word liberal, he would have this angry, visceral reaction, right? And he would, of course, obviously he sees himself as a conservative, and in his mind, liberal means that you're a transgender, communist,
Marxist,
Leninist, Marxist person who wants to destroy America. That's what the word means to him, right? And it doesn't matter how much you try to explain that away. That's the reaction that general population and people have because that's the way the media has cast it. because we take these words and we run them together with other things, and we call things that they're not. And I think we're at a point where the words have no meaning. I think that when you talk about people who say they're conservative, some of them aren't conservative at all, right? Because you think about conservatives, it's in the word, right? They want to conserve things. So they don't want to spend a lot of money on things, and they don't want to exploit a lot of things, and they want to be slow to change rules, and conservatives from a political standpoint traditionally kind of wanted stronger central government. I mean, that was Hamilton, right? Hamilton was the conservative. He was the guy that wanted the federal government to be a strong federal government, and to have much more influence in the lives of other people. Conservatives want to have more control over society in history. But this person I was talking to, he saw conservative as being pro Bill of Rights and freedom of speech and all these things. Then that's not conservatism at all, at least not in a historical sense. That's just what the words have been kind of pitched around to mean. So I don't think the words mean anything anymore at all. And I think
we've oversimplified it, right? We've stripped it down to what and changed what it means, right? So if you're on the left, depending you're the left or the right. There is nothing else but that. And I think that you can be left-leaning. As a conservative, you could be left-leaning in terms of how you think of how schools should be funded or not. It's almost like if you say you're conservative means you're pro-war.
Right.
Here's what's weird. If you look at who's in power that have always been in power on the Democratic side, they aren't conservative. They're not labeled as conservatives, but they're pro-war. They're pro-tax. They're pro-more government, right?
The Republican what does that mean? Think about those three things.
Think
about those three things. What does that mean? That means that they're
pro-government.
They're pro-wealthy people.
Oh. Well, but that's the part is when I'm listening to, again, these more extreme viewpoints that you can only find on YouTube. They would never be on television because I think it would be such a radical change. It is Johnny Carson and Arsenio Hall at the same time.
Right.
This is so far afield, and it will burn out quickly. So let's just go with the same thing, right? So the same talking heads are always the same talking heads, but we've lost that aspect of where you can be like Tulsi Gabbard, as I always say. First of all, I'm going to marry her. If she ever meets me, she's going to love being on this show instead of you. But she's
I want to tell you right now that if you replace me with Tulsi Gabbard, I will gracefully bow out and say that was a great choice.
I'm still going to call her C. Stanley Willis.
Well, don't do that. Call her Tulsi. Tulsi's a cooler name than C. Stanley Willis.
But you're going to feel slighted if I don't do that.
No, I'm not. I'm going to say...
I'm going to change the opening graphic.
I'm going to say, dude, made a great choice there because... if I could kick you out and get her, I'd do it in a heartbeat.
That's like the most hurtful thing you've ever said on the show.
She's way more interesting than you, by the way.
Are you? Well, let me tell you. But see, you've got a Democrat who's being attacked because she's saying this is the craziest thing. She wants to end wars.
Right.
And the Democrats are saying she's a Russian asset. I want to end wars, not continue them, and I'm a Russian asset.
Right.
That's insane to me.
Right.
But that's how bad it is where her own party has flipped on her. Or Yang. Yang has to be an independent because his party says your thinking is so far afield. If you're a liberal, you're supposed to be on that end. You're supposed to be trying to give money to the people.
His thinking isn't that whacked out, though. I mean, I don't agree with those conclusions. I mean, I watched him Tucker Carlson. I read some stuff that he's published. Couple op-eds and things like that. He's not as wacky as I thought he was.
He's not, but
he's not as wacky as but before what I knew about him was what I heard about from the media, and obviously they were wrong, and they were just trying to turn a political agenda. He's not as wacky as
he's not, but now he has to go be an independent, and because his own party goofed on him and basically pushed him out to where they're never going to support anything he has to say.
I think he's got a good shot at getting a party started. I think he's got.
I do too, but all you're going to do at that point is if you can swing an election and get that independent to say 6 to 8%.
I think 4% is where the money goes.
It is, but I'm saying if you went to an election and you say, because if you look at them, they're never, other than McCain,
right?
They're never swinging that far afield. It's always 51-48. Right. But if you could get that to where the end
of a nut job, by the way.
But he was, but I think he was so old. And Stockwell, his vice president, you remember those debates where the guy couldn't hear? The guy's a war hero who half his hearing was blown out, and he could not hear the questions in a vice presidential debate. That's when it was over. But I will say that Perrault was very pro-America, pro-people, and for the most part.
I'd say so.
And it was, this is a joke. If the independents could ever get to 7 or 8%, that changes those numbers of Democrat and Republican.
Yeah, I honestly think, and when you're looking at what I think would be best for the country, I think if we had 5 or 6 parties that represented 10 to 20% of the population each, I think you would wind up with much better. You'd wind up with much better governance and legislation, and honestly, better cooperation than what we get now.
Well, we'd get corporate money out too. Not all together.
No, it wouldn't do away with it.
But if I only have to back two horses, it's easier for me to say I'll divide it evenly.
Right.
If I have to do it across 5, you're buying favor. These outside corporations are buying favor.
And essentially, if you look at the parties now, so back when Clinton won his second term, would that have been 96?
Was it 96?
I think it was 96.
92 to 96 and 96 to 2000.
He ran against
Bob
Dole, who at the time, Bob Dole was the Republican. He was the king. He was Mr. Republican guy. He was the Senate Majority Leader, I think, and had just incredible influence. And he was on Larry King Live. And Larry King, who I love because, he's smoking a cigarette and barely can talk and dying.
Smoking a cigarette?
Yeah.
He had 4 in the chamber and he was constantly just...
Right. And he says to Bob Dole, he says, tell me on a national basis, what is the difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party? And Bob Dole's answer, I'll never forget it. He actually sat back from the microphone. And he goes, on a national basis, the only difference between Republicans and Democrats is that the Democrats want to grow the government by 8%, and the Republicans only want to grow it by 4%. Now think about all the things we think are different between the parties. And this is the guy who's the Republican, right? He's the Republican. He's got the most influence of anybody else in the world. He says, it's basically no difference.
Right.
4% difference in growth in the government. That's it. Everything else, you can't tell the difference between the parties. So ever since that time, I have been kind of the opinion that there's really it's you're voting for the same master, just going by a different name.
Right.
And I don't. I think that the government has become so large. And I think on our previous episode we were talking about, I had some hope because America had corrected itself. The difference is, when America corrected itself before, it was the Reagan administration. The national debt was less than $1 trillion. I think it was $980 million at that time. The government was at roughly half the size that it is now as far as the amount of employees. We only had one real spy agency. They really had the CIA. There wasn't all these other ones that were created in the Patriot Act. You really had a much smaller government that could be much more reactive to the things that were going on. So when when Reagan tried to act to correct things, he had fewer impediments to kind of deal with. Now you have this huge behemoth of permanent government employees who don't change from administration to administration, a lot of whom function on ideological bases that have no relevance to what's going on at the level of the president or the legislature. And they're really in control of things. I mean, the people who are permanent are the ones who are basically determining policy and all those things. That really doesn't happen at the president's level. And so I think that kind of puts us in a position where it almost doesn't matter which party's in charge. It almost doesn't matter who's in charge. To a degree, the government's just kind of going to do what it does. And it's kind of out of our control at this point.
What an uplifting way to end. Thank you for doing that, communist Stanley Willis. That's what the C stands for.
There's no communist in me.
Sorry, righty. That's going to be it for the show this week. You've been listening to Objections with Stan Willis, and we will see you later.